It was an electrical problem on the power unit, different to Lando's. So yeah, just very unfortunate to both have issues, but we don't fully know any more than that at this point. So yeah, obviously disappointing. I think try and learn what we can by watching the race, and yeah, then after that. Yeah, just trying to do as much work as we can before Japan. You know, I think obviously the problems today have been annoying, but I think besides that, we know we've got work to do to find more performance. So that's what we'll.
Not a huge amount, honestly. Just an issue that's not letting us even start the car. Yeah, that's basically it. That's all I know for now. I think they're still trying to investigate what is actually happening or what's going on or why it's not working as it should. But of course, frustrating to come such a long way, put in a lot of effort. Not just for me, but the whole team, and not even start a race. So disappointing.
Something unbelievable just happened in Formula One. Two McLarens, both ready to start from the third row of the grid, both expected to fight for a podium in China. And then, neither of them even started the race. Not a crash. Not a strategy mistake. Not even a mechanical failure during the race. The cars simply refused to start. Within minutes, the entire paddock began asking the same question. How do two cars from the same team fail at the exact same moment, before the race even begins? Because this wasn't just bad luck. Both failures were linked to the electrical side of the Mercedes power unit. The same engine package used by multiple teams across the grid. And suddenly, what looked like a McLaren disaster started to look like something much bigger. A potential weakness in one of the most powerful engine programs in Formula One. Which is exactly why the FIA is now paying very close attention. Because if this problem spreads to other Mercedes-powered teams, the entire championship could be affected. And the most shocking part? This happened only 2 races into the brand new 2026 regulations. Meaning the real consequences might not appear until much later in the season. So the real question is no longer what happened to McLaren. The real question is Mercedes already in serious trouble? The Chinese Grand Prix was only the second race of the 2026 season. But already, the pressure inside the paddock felt enormous. New regulations. New power unit architecture. New energy systems that are far more complex than anything Formula One has used before. Every team arrived in Shanghai knowing something important. The first races of a regulation era often reveal problems nobody expected. Hidden weaknesses. Small design flaws. Electronic systems that behave perfectly in simulations, but fail under real race pressure. And McLaren arrived in China with something rare. Momentum. The car looked fast in Australia. The drivers were confident. And qualifying in Shanghai confirmed it. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri placed both cars inside the top 6. A strong position. Close enough to attack the leaders. Close enough to collect serious championship points. Inside the garage, the atmosphere was optimistic. Engineers believed the MCL40 had real race pace. Strategy simulations looked promising. Tire degradation appeared manageable. Everything pointed toward a solid Sunday. But Formula One weekends can change in seconds. And in this case, the first warning sign appeared quietly. About 1 hour before the race. Inside the McLaren garage. Engineers detected something unusual in the telemetry coming from Norris's car. An electronic irregularity. At first, it looked small. The kind of issue that sometimes appears during pre-race system checks. Nothing dramatic. Nothing alarming. But the team decided not to take risks. Mechanics immediately removed the floor of the car. Panels came off. Electrical components around the power unit were inspected carefully. Engineers connected diagnostic systems and began analyzing the data. And for a moment, the team believed they had solved it. Everything seemed stable again. Systems looked normal. The car appeared ready. But then something happened that changed the entire situation. During the final power unit start procedure inside the garage, the system failed. The engine would not fire up. Not because of fuel. Not because of the internal combustion engine. But because the electrical side of the power unit suddenly stopped responding. That detail matters more than most people realize. Because in the 2026 Formula One cars, the electrical system is not just an auxiliary component. It is the backbone of the entire powertrain. Energy recovery. Energy deployment. Hybrid synchronization. Everything depends on that system working perfectly. If the electrical architecture collapses, the car simply cannot operate. And that is exactly what McLaren engineers were suddenly facing. Inside the garage, mechanics worked desperately. Reset procedures, emergency diagnostics, system reboots. Every possible solution was attempted, but nothing worked. The clock was ticking. Cars were already leaving the pit lane to form the grid. And Norris's car was still silent, still lifeless. The reigning world champion was about to miss the race entirely. But what nobody inside the paddock knew at that moment was that the situation was about to become even worse. Because while McLaren engineers were fighting to revive Norris's car, Oscar Piastri's car was already sitting on the starting grid. And everything looked completely normal. At least, for a few more minutes. Because the moment the team attempted to restart the car on the grid, something shocking happened. The engine refused to start. Again. Another electrical failure. Another system shutdown. Another car that suddenly could not run. And now the entire paddock was staring at the McLaren garage, trying to understand how something like this could happen. Not once, but twice. Within the same race. Within the same team. And connected to the exact same subsystem. The electrical side of the Mercedes power unit. But the moment both McLarens were pushed back into the garage, the real shock began to spread through the paddock. Because this was not a retirement. This was not even a race failure. This was something much worse. Two cars that never started the Grand Prix. For McLaren, a team with decades of Formula One history, that had never happened before due to pure reliability issues. And in Formula One, moments like this immediately trigger questions. Serious questions. Inside the McLaren garage, the first reaction was frustration. Mechanics had spent the entire weekend preparing two competitive cars. Engineers had executed qualifying perfectly. Both drivers had delivered strong laps. Everything was in place. And yet, the race was over before the formation lap. Lando Norris spoke shortly after the incident, and his frustration was impossible to hide. He explained that the issue came from the electrical side of the power unit. An area of the car that is now incredibly complex under the new regulations. But what hurt the most was something simpler. He could not do his job. After days of preparation. After hundreds of hours of work by the team. He never even had the chance to race. Oscar Piastri described a very similar situation. From his perspective, everything had been normal. The car arrived at the grid without warnings. No strange data. No visible problems. Then, when the team attempted the standard restart procedure on the grid, the car simply did not respond. The system failed instantly. Another electrical issue connected to the same power unit architecture. And that is when the scale of the situation became clear. Two different moments. Two different failure symptoms. But both linked to the same fundamental subsystem. The electrical side of the Mercedes power unit. Andrea Stella addressed the media shortly after the race. And his explanation revealed something extremely unusual. He confirmed that the failures were technically different. But they originated in the same component area. And according to Stella, the coincidence of two failures appearing at the same time was extremely rare. In Formula One, rare events always attract attention. Because when something extremely unlikely happens twice, engineers immediately assume something deeper is hiding underneath. And that is exactly why the next phase began almost immediately. A joint investigation. McLaren engineers. Mercedes high-performance powertrains. Both groups working together to understand what went wrong. Because identifying the exact cause is now critical. Not just for McLaren, but potentially for every team using Mercedes power units. And this is where the situation becomes even more sensitive. Because while McLaren suffered two catastrophic failures, the official Mercedes Works team did not experience the same problem during the race weekend. At least not in the same way. Which raises a quiet but uncomfortable question inside the paddock. Is this purely a McLaren integration issue? Or is it a deeper reliability weakness inside the Mercedes power unit itself? Right now, nobody is giving a definitive answer. Publicly, both teams are maintaining a calm tone. Mercedes says it is cooperating fully with the investigation. McLaren insists they are not assigning blame. But inside Formula One, people are watching carefully. Because if another Mercedes-powered car experiences a similar failure in the next races, then what happened in China will no longer look like bad luck. It will look like the first warning sign of something much bigger. And if that turns out to be true, the 2026 season could suddenly become much more complicated for Mercedes than anyone expected. But inside Formula One, investigations like this rarely stay simple. Because once engineers begin analyzing a failure, they often discover something deeper. And that is exactly the concern surrounding the Mercedes power unit in 2026. To understand why this situation is so serious, we need to look at one crucial detail. The new regulation cycle changed the balance of power inside the engine completely. In previous generations of Formula One engines, the internal combustion engine was still the dominant element. The electrical systems were important, but they were supporting components. Now that balance has shifted dramatically. Under the 2026 regulations, electrical power represents a much larger percentage of the total performance output. Energy recovery systems are more aggressive. Energy deployment is more complex. And the synchronization between electrical and combustion elements has become incredibly sensitive. Which means something critical. If the electrical side fails, the entire power unit becomes useless. The car cannot move. It cannot even start. And that is exactly the scenario McLaren experienced in China. 2 cars, 2 different failure moments, but both linked to that same electrical architecture. And that is why the FIA is quietly observing the situation. Because reliability is not just a team problem. It can become a championship problem. Imagine a scenario where multiple Mercedes-powered teams begin experiencing similar electrical failures during the season. Not every race, not every car, just enough incidents to affect results. That kind of pattern could dramatically influence the competitive balance of the championship. And in modern Formula One, the FIA must monitor situations that could affect fairness across the grid. But there is another layer to this story that many fans have not noticed yet. A political layer. Because customer teams depend heavily on their engine suppliers. McLaren relies on Mercedes for its power unit. Williams relies on Mercedes. Several teams depend on the same technology. But those teams are also competing directly against Mercedes' own factory operation. And historically, that relationship has always contained tension. Customer teams need full technical understanding to operate the engine safely and efficiently. But manufacturers also protect their intellectual property. That creates a natural barrier. Information is shared, but not always everything. Andrea Stella hinted at this very carefully in his comments after the race. He explained that McLaren needs deeper understanding and better tools to extract the full potential from the power unit under the new regulations. On the surface, that sounds like a normal technical comment. But inside Formula One, statements like that carry meaning. Because when a customer team asks for more information, it usually means they believe they are missing something important. Something that could prevent situations like the one we saw in China. At the same time, McLaren also emphasized another crucial detail. Nothing changed between qualifying and race day. No new components. No experimental configuration. No aggressive setup adjustments. The same hardware that worked perfectly on Saturday suddenly failed on Sunday. That detail is what truly worries engineers. Because failures that appear without warning are often the hardest to diagnose. A component weakness. A rare electrical synchronization error. A vulnerability that only appears under very specific conditions. And if that is the case, then the next races could reveal whether China was a coincidence, or the first sign of a reliability weakness inside the Mercedes power unit. Because if even one more similar failure appears, the entire conversation in the paddock will change. And suddenly, the most dominant engine manufacturer of the hybrid era could find itself facing a problem it cannot ignore. A problem that may only be beginning to reveal itself.